from telling my friends when I was maybe 13, 14, that I felt that I was different from them and didn't understand why. And then when I was questioning whether I was gay or not and was like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe, and then was totally abandoned, that for me made me suppress my sexuality for most of my teens, most of my 20s. It was a traumatic event. Hey guys, I'm Calum Scott and this is my Pride. My first ever Pride experience was years ago now, and it was actually at Hull Pride, Pride in my city up here in Yorkshire, and I think that was probably as well before I was openly gay, or at least in the public sense of it. And for me, I was there as a performer. This was way before Britain's Got Talent, way before I was signed. This was kind of when I discovered that I loved music, I loved performing, and I was working with a couple of different promoters and local things. I remember being there and just being so overwhelmed with how, people were just being themselves. I think for Pride, if you've never been before, it kind of feels like there's so much going on and there's so much colour and so much like personality and things like that for somebody like me, it was exciting, but it was also a bit scary, because I still hadn't come to a place where I was confident with it, and yet I was at an event where everybody seems very confident but what it did do over the course of that day, it did make me sort of look and not be envious of people, but just be like, I wish that I felt more comfortable to do that. And then, like I said, because of the people that you meet and the fact that you're surrounded by this sense of pride and this sense of belonging, I just, as the day went on, I kind of felt more and more at peace with myself. And even though I think that, somebody's personal journey will take time, and I think that it's got to be something that you feel comfortable with. And I think that experience of being at that Pride and performing and just being in amongst it was definitely for me a massive confidence booster, and was a real stepping stone for me in my own journey. From telling my friends when I was maybe 13, 14, that I felt that I was different from them and didn't understand why, and then when I was questioning whether I was gay or not and was like, yeah, well, I don't know, maybe, and then was totally abandoned, that for me made me suppress my sexuality for most of my teens, most of my 20s. It was a traumatic event. I'd seen what me being honest had done and how it had, crushed me, that I was like, well, for me now, I'm never going to tell anybody else, because then I'm going to lose more people. And luckily, when I told my parents, it was a beautiful moment. It's a song called No Matter What from the first album, if you need a reference. But it was a beautiful, it was a beautiful thing for me to hear that, because, if I hadn't have been accepted by somebody, then I think things would have felt a lot darker for me. But then growing up, like I say, as a whole lad, I just kind of kept that under wraps and was like, I don't want to lose anybody else. I need to just carry on, pick myself up. And so I sort of lived with that for a long time. And it wasn't really until I discovered music where I started to open up a bit more. Obviously, Dance on My Own, for me and for many others, is a gay anthem. And when I did my own version of Dance on My Own, I specifically kept the pronouns to make sense to me. I'm in the corner watching You Kiss Hair. I'm not the guy you're taking home. I sort of adapted it to make sure that I was coming from my own personal perspective with that song. And I think that resonated with people. And then when I saw that resonating, I've become more honest in my own songwriting. And that's when I wrote No Matter What, which is my entire journey of telling my friends, telling my parents, and how that made me feel. I wanted to give both sides of the coin of how that can, affect somebody's journey. And then it's not all great, especially with my friends being totally abandoned by all my mates at a young age. It was devastating to me. And I understand that that's not necessarily the case with friends, sometimes with family, and sometimes there's, somebody can be honest and have no understanding from anybody around them. So, I wanted to put out a song there that exists in the pop world that has that kind of relatability. And I think that was what really made me feel secure in my position. Not so much as a confident gay man necessarily, because it's taken a long time for me to say that. If you'd have asked me that 15 years ago, I hate the fact that we've got to say that, but like a decade and a half ago, if you'd have asked me that question, I would have been like, that is something I will never ever say. Because I felt so ashamed of myself because of my own experience and my own journey with it, that I was so terrified that I would lose other people. You'd never hear me saying something like that. And then, you know, through music and through accepting myself and being able to be honest enough to put my heart on my sleeve and put my diary entry up there for people to listen to, it was seeing the relatability of that and reading the YouTube comments and getting the DMs and people messaging me to tell me how that song related so hard to them, or, you know, that somebody had listened to it and was so moved by it, that's when I was like, this has now become a goal of mine, like an objective, to use my own circumstances, however painful, to create a tool for people. And I think that's when I was like, do you know what? That for me felt like my acceptance. And not only did I accept myself as, you know, as somebody who was honest, who talked about their situations, but for me to talk honestly and openly about being a gay man, which I would have never have done. So I just think, you know, even though my journey's taken a bit of time, for me, I feel so proud that I've attached something that will hopefully help other people in their journeys, because it feels like I'm giving back. It feels like, as horrible as what I went through was, if it helps somebody else and somebody listens to that song goes, do you know what? Like I hear that, you know, that I hear that story, that resonates with me. I'm gonna, you know, be open with my family. I mean, making a difference. That's magical.